Hi guys, welcome back to Hayes Review. Today I'm joined here by
Jake.
my brother, and we will be reviewing episode 8 of The Last of Us. So let's get into it. So last episode, Joel gets stabbed by
A baseball bat.
a baseball bat that got broken. So Ellie is taking care of him. She sewed up his wound, but doesn't have any medicine for infections or anything. So, and also they're running out of food.
He's not looking good.
He's not looking good. He can't talk. He can't move. He doesn't eat. He doesn't drink water. He can't really do much.
Just laying on a mattress in the basement.
Yeah, in the basement of a house. And also, it's snowing outside. Ellie gathers the courage to go scavenge some food, and she takes the gun,
Goes hunting.
and miraculously, she finds a deer and shoots it, but it doesn't die immediately. It runs off, and then she finds it later. But we are then introduced to David, who is the leader of this cultish group. And we don't really know his intentions from the beginning. He's just this leader of this cult group. We don't...
Because they find the deer that Ellie shot, and they want to take it, and then she's like, hands off.
Yeah, so there's David, who is the leader, and then he's with James, who is his like right-hand man, who is played by Troy Baker, who voiced Joel in the video game.
Yep.
Which I thought was really cool that they had him guest star. But yeah, so they find the deer that Ellie shot, and they're like, oh, goody, we didn't have to do anything. Here's a free deer. So then they try to take it, and Ellie shows up and is like, don't you dare, that's my deer, and is pointing the rifle at them. And, you know, they strike a deal, and they say, well, we have medicine if you want to give us half the deer. And she's like, okay, deal, but I'm not going anywhere with you guys. And so Troy Baker, or James, goes off and goes to get the medicine, and then it's David and Ellie they drag the deer into this shack type thing.
Yep.
And so they're talking and just chatting, and Ellie is just waiting for for James to get back with the medicine. And there's a conversation where David is explaining how he sent out 4 of his men to go gather supplies, get food, get whatever. And all of them died. I think all of them died.
I think, yeah.
And apparently they were killed by this crazy man who was accompanied by a little girl.
Yep.
So then Ellie puts 2 and 2 together and is like, oh, wow, he knows about me and Joel. This isn't a good situation. And then James shows up with the medicine and is like, that's the little girl who was with the man that killed whoever they killed, right? And David is like, put the gun down, give her the medicine, let her go. Obviously, this community is starving. They don't have food.
Yep.
And this guy brings out this meat while they're preparing lunch, I'm assuming. And
she asks, is this veal? And he's like, yeah.
Yeah, she's like, what is it? And he's like, oh, it's venison. And she's like,
yeah.
Okay. So then they're all eating the soup, and it's blatantly obvious that, oh yeah, so in the beginning, they were talking about this guy who died, and can we bury him? And David's like, well, the ground is too hard and too cold.
It's the girl's dad.
Yeah, it's the girl's dad. And so it's pretty obvious that they're eating him, and
she's
not
eating him.
venison.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're all eating this human soup, I like to call it, and it's really, really gross, and they're all chowing down. Anyway, so then Ellie gets back to Joel with the medicine, and she injects him, I think it's penicillin or something like that, and she injects him with it. So all of a sudden she hears people coming, and she runs downstairs where Joel is and gives Joel a knife and tells him, like, hey, by the way, if these guys are coming after us, if they end up coming down here, just be ready to fight. And she's basically saying, like, don't die, I need you. Like, try to survive as best you can. And so she leaves, and she gets on the horse, and I think she's just trying to distract them from Joel or something, and, like, rides off on the horse, and
she's like, hey, guys, look over here.
She's like, hey, assholes, or something like that, and then, like, is riding on the horse, and then James, or Troy Baker, he shoots the horse, and Ellie falls and is,
captured.
captured. Yeah, she gets knocked unconscious basically. And David takes her back to their community and then locks her in a cell. And then
She sees a human ear.
yeah, so she's in her cell. She wakes up, and David is bringing her food, and she sees a human ear on the ground, and is like, "You guys are eating people, like you're sick." And then he explains, like, "I didn't mean to hurt. I didn't mean to eat people. You know, I have to feed however many people. They're starving. I'm their leader." He is being super creepy and, you know, being like, "Oh, don't worry, we won't hurt him." Like, talking about Joel, I think. Like, he's gonna be okay. Like, I don't know, just making false promises to her. And he puts his hand on the, one of the bars of the cell, and then she puts her hand over his, and then, like, breaks his finger. She won't tell him her name. And after she breaks his finger, she's like, "Oh, it's Ellie, by the way. Then that's the name of the girl that broke your effing finger." And it was just, I love that part. And then he was like, what was that you said? Chopped up into tiny pieces, which she mentioned earlier, whereas like, I don't want to get chopped up into tiny pieces if that's what you're planning to do with me. And then he leaves. And then it cuts to Joel. And he sneaks up behind this guy, stabs him in the throat, and then the guy dies.
Joel is like hunting down all these guys, trying to track him down. Then he
We'll
gets
figure out where Ellie is.
What?
He's
He's trying to
figure out
yeah,
where Ellie
yeah.
is.
Yeah. He's trying to figure out where Ellie is and is killing all these guys, and eventually he like tortures this one guy to get information, then kills him, and then
What town? Right.
yeah, and then he gets this other guy, and then he tells him the correct information, but he still kills him.
Yeah. It shows a glimpse of
How brutal
Joel used to operate. James and David both get into her cell and are taking her onto, I guess you could say, the chopping block where they kill their prey or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're about to like kill her. Well, whenever she is fighting, she's fighting both of them, and then she ends up biting David.
Mm-hmm.
And then she gets onto the table, and she's like, I'm infected.
She's like, look at my arm.
And then she shows them her bite mark, and they're like, oh. And then James looks at David, and he's like, David, are you gonna be okay? And he's like, that's not true. That can't be true, or something like that. And then while they're distracted talking about it, Ellie grabs one of the cleavers and
hits him right in the neck.
Yeah, and shoves it into James' neck. Yeah, so she runs out into the dining area and finds this torch, and she's holding it, you know, ready to attack. Ellie is hiding while he's calling out her name, and then she throws the torch at him, and it misses him and falls back into the curtains, so then the curtains engulf in flames. And he sees her, obviously, and grabs her, and then she gets thrown to the ground, and it's a really disturbing scene, and really uncomfortable, but he's basically trying to take advantage of her, and he tells her that he likes fighting. He thinks fighting is the best part.
Yeah.
And you can only assume one thing that he's talking about. So then she luckily has a knife right next to her, and she grabs it and stabs him in the neck, and then he turns over onto his back, and then she begins chopping him, like mutilating him.
Yeah. Like every episode of The Boys.
Yes.
Like brutal.
Yeah, brutally killing this guy, which is, you know, well deserved because he was, you know,
scumbag.
Yes. So she's just chopping him up, you know, and then she ends up going out of the dining hall or whatever you would call it, and it's, you know, completely on fire. And then Joel runs into her, and she's like in shock. She's still in shock. She's still going through the emotions, what is it called? She's still going through the motions, and he's like, it's okay, like, it's me. and then they end up like having an embrace, and then
they walk away.
They walk away together, and that's the end of the episode. And I really, I think it was a really good, you know, it just shows how much fight Ellie has in her. Went through all of this practically, I mean, completely by herself, because Joel didn't even show up until the end. And she gave Joel a weapon to defend himself. Like, you know, I feel like they're both equally, you know, helping each other in that sense.
Yeah.
Like, so I think she did a really good job. And the acting was amazing by Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal.
Who did David?
Plays David, who is Scott Shepherd, did a really, really good job. I mean, compared to the game, you know, I think he represented David very, very well. So yeah, just really, really good acting this episode. So that is our recap for episode 8 of The Last of Us. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed our recap of episode 8. Now, getting into my favorite scene, least favorite scene, and one thing I would change about that episode. It is a crazy episode, first of all. Probably one of my favorites of the first season, or of the entire season. Yeah, so let's get into it. I would have to say my favorite scene is when Ellie takes a butcher knife to David's face. It is such a girl boss moment, in my opinion, and she just... You are rooting for her. You are rooting for her to slice and dice him because of what he was trying to do to her and how horrible a person he was, and his intentions were just awful. I don't even want to know what would have happened. So yeah, that is my favorite scene because you are just screaming at the TV. Another event added on to all the traumatic events she's endured. And it just shows you how strong of a person she is and what she's willing to do to survive. And yeah, so that is my favorite scene. Oh, also, honorable mention to the scene where Joel is interrogating the 2 men from David's group. It is such a good scene. It shows you the man that Joel used to be and what he is willing, like the lengths he's willing to go to save Ellie. And it's just, I think it's a good scene because it shows you who he used to be in the past and how he's much different from who he was before to who he is now, and it shows you that drastic jump. So yeah. I would say, oh yes. So my least favorite scene is whenever there's a cut to David's group and they're all eating the venison soup. And we know it's not venison. I mean, I did at least, because it was just so blatantly obvious whenever the cooks asked the butcher, like, hey, what kind of meat is this? He's like, oh, it's venison. And they just like went along with it, which I understand because they're starving. So like, obviously they're not going to refuse food. Even if it is human, don't know if I would have done that in that situation, but you know, whatever. So it's the scene when they're all chowing down on the human soup. I just hate mouth noises, and I hate like the gross like meat chunks they had in there. So yeah, that's just my opinion. It was gross. It was a really gross scene. So that's my least favorite scene. So now into one thing I would change. So, again, in the game, whenever Ellie and David first meet, they have to fight off a lot of these infected that, I guess, hear Ellie's shot whenever she shoots the deer, and then David and his right-hand man get there first. And I'm not really sure. I think he does show up with his right-hand man in the game also, and then sends him off, and then that's when Ellie and David have to work together to survive. But it would have been cool to see that scene, because then, like, them fighting with each other, or, like, helping each other fight off the infected, and then it turns into him, you know, saying that line where he's like, oh yeah, it was this crazy guy and this little girl, and then she all of a sudden realizes that he knows who she is. So it would have been cool to see that. So yeah, that wraps up my opinions about episode 8. Bye.
I can't help but laugh when you talk about human soup.
Hey everybody, welcome to Hayes Review. Class is in session. I bet you're wondering what these are. I'll explain. So I will be ranking my favorite characters from The Last of Us, episode 8, from first to second to third to fourth to fifth. So yes, let's get into it. So ranking at number 5, we have Mr. David. So I really only put him up here because there are not that many characters in episode 8. But I think he's an awful, horrible character. But I think the actor did a fantastic job of demonstrating what a horrible person that David is. And I'm more talking about the actor than the character, if that makes sense. I just think this actor did a really great job of making us hate him, which, you know, obviously he is the villain of this episode, completely the villain of this episode. So, yeah, in terms of acting, I think he did a really great job of representing that. Now, on to Mr. Troy Baker. So his name is James in the show, but if you guys did or did not know, Troy Baker is the actor who voices Joel in the video games. And I think that's a really, really great thing to have in the show, a little Easter egg that I really like, that they had him play a character in the show. I think it's great. So I think, his name was James. He didn't really do much. He did get a butcher knife in the neck, but, you know, he didn't really do much in the show besides be David's right-hand man. But yeah, I just think that was a really cute thing that they did, that HBO did, was have him included in the show. And now on to number 3. Number 3, we have Callus, the little horsey that died because David's dumbass men killed him. Like, I love this horse. Like, he got them where they were going, and it's really nice to have a horse as a companion in this world to get you to and from. R.I.P. Callus. On to number 2. We have Joel. So Joel, he was very, very sick in this episode. He has just been stabbed. They're low on food and water. There's no available medical supplies. So they're really struggling here. It's infected. His wound is infected. He might not make it. And so whenever Ellie ends up getting him his medicine, he finally pulls through and ends up killing one of David's men, which I think is crazy. In terms of just being on your deathbed and then getting 2 shots of penicillin and being like, okay, yeah, I can take on the world, basically. So, and also he's great because he gets up, kills the guy that tries to go downstairs and find him, and then proceeds to torture 2 of David's men to try to figure out where Ellie is. So, he's a boss. You know, he's a real one. He's the MVP. He's all of those. He's the DOG. Like, anyway, really great stuff from Joel. And now at number 1, we have Ellie. So Ellie really sacrifices everything she has. So Ellie overcomes all of these obstacles and all this adversity she is faced with. She's just a badass. She breaks David's finger, slices his neck open, and then butchers his face. I'm like, okay, girl, go off. She really did it. She really did. And it all on her own. It just shows how strong and independent she really is. And she went hunting for Joel in the beginning of the episode and then made an exchange with David for Joel's medicine, in which if she didn't get it, he would not be alive. He would not be around to have, found her. And honestly, Ellie didn't even need Joel in this circumstance. She did all of it on her own. which is crazy for a 14-year-old. Obviously she's traumatized now, but I think she was a badass in this episode, and I think she deserves all the cookies for this one. So yeah, that wraps up episode 8. Thanks, bye.